Welcome to iPad Pros, the show all about using your iPad to be productive and get work done. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show.
It is fun. You will have fun with it. Even if you put things in there that are not synchronous. Like the other day, I just put a bunch of backgrounds from Storyblocks in there. And then I cut it to music. I just cut it to the beat to music. And it created a nice background I did it in seconds, and it was fun and beautiful.
Welcome back to another episode of iPad Pros. I'm really pleased to be joined today by Terri Morgan of LumaFusion. She is the co-founder and lead designer of this amazing video editing app. And they've just rolled out version 4, which includes the Multicam Studio, a feature I've been waiting for since pretty much day one of LumaFusion. It's one of my favorite features of video editing apps, and they've really done a great job at implementing Multicam into LumaFusion. So in this episode, we're going to be diving deep into LumaFusion, in particular the Multicam update, plus some of the other updates that's come out since we last spoke, which was back in 2017 for episode 3 of this podcast. Terri was the very first guest of this podcast, and it's really great to have her back on to dive into all of the things that they've been working on. As a reminder, for as little as $1 a month, you can support this podcast over at patreon.com/iPadPros or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. And if you don't even have $1 to toss this way, I'd really appreciate just a review in Apple Podcasts. That goes a long way in helping others discover the show. So if you have just a minute, head on over to Apple Podcasts to leave a review of the show. Greatly, greatly appreciated. And with that, here's my interview with Terri. Enjoy. Well, welcome back to the podcast, Terri. It's been a fair bit. You were our very first guest on the show for episode 3 back in July of 2017. And LumaFusion's had many updates since then. So welcome back.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Tim. I enjoyed it the last time, and I'm sure I'll enjoy it today.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So last time you were on, I believe I even talked about the desire for Multicam being in LumaFusion one day. So it's fun to have this update out now that we're going to chat about this huge update of Multicam Studio being added to LumaFusion. So yeah, that's big news.
It is big news. It's big news for us too, because we've been working on it for 3 years, basically. We had demonstrated it at an Apple event, and it was a technology demonstration just showing how powerful their iPads are. And then when we came back and thought, well, is this a feature that customers could really use in a functional way? Would it please them? We realized we had a lot of work to do to make the functionality and the experience better. So we started down that path and thought we were doing pretty good. And then we started a usability test, and they said, we want to use it for this, or we want to use it for that. And oh boy, we were... it's because it's so complicated, because Multicam has multiple parts to it. Right. You have to collect the media, and you have to start the process and collect the media, then put the media into something that synchronizes it. Mm-hmm. And then you have to switch the media, and then you have to decide what you're going to do with the switched item. Right. Like, is it a container, or is it just clips on your timeline?
Yeah.
And that, we didn't want it to be like any other multicam. And I think there were many times when, our team said, hey, you could just do it like Final Cut, or you could do it like so-and-so. And I was like, no, I'm not doing it that way. So it's my fault it took so long. But I wanted it to be like a different experience. Like, Multicam has been out. When I first started editing in the late 80s, Multicam was something that any application that kind of had matured a little had a version of Multicam. And almost every Multicam since then is very similar.
Yeah.
It's a pain. You have to look up what the rules are in the user guide, or you're not going to get through it. And here we are with a new touch device, that we can have a completely intuitive experience where you're just tapping to, I want to cut to this and that with your finger. It's just so different And so one of my, you know, demands, I guess, was that the drop zones, the angles for multicam were organized in a way that was natural. And to me, a 1 through 6 was natural.
Yeah.
Instead of having them all up in your library where you have smaller thumbnails and it goes like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 at the bottom, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want to use it that way. I want to use it like so that when I'm cutting, it's horizontal and I see my horizontal cutting happening right under.
Yeah.
It's like I just had these ideas of how I wanted it. And
because an essential part of Multicam is being able to see the live preview of all 6 camera angles to know when to make the cuts. Yeah.
Yeah. And I felt it should be fun. Like that should be a thing where you just almost like you're at the event experiencing it from many angles at once, that kind of feeling. And I think we achieved that now, but it really did take many usability rounds and many, like there were things like, there were things as simple as I can't figure out how to start the feature. Like I can't figure out, I'm on my timeline. How do I make a multicam? And then there were more complex things like I want to map my audio from one camera to another before I switch.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just a lot of work and we did a really good job, I think. I'm excited.
Excellent. Yeah, and I'm excited to dive into it. Something I noticed is this is one of the few applications with Multicam that now takes advantage of the M1 chip and M2 chip. How important is that chip? Like if someone's trying this on an A12Z or an A12X, is it usable with, say, a 3-camera edit, or what's kind of the experience?
I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. So you can multicam edit on my iPhone, 10R.
Yeah.
This is, you can do it.
It'll work. And the features in there. Yeah.
Because, multicam runs with 6 tracks of 4K already, just on any iPad or iPhone running iOS 15.4. So multicam is no different than that. You're running 6 tracks, right? Because we have 6 drop zones or 6 angles. So it's no more difficult than that. But I can tell you that with a M2 iPad Pro, you can run 16 tracks of 4K.
Oh, that's exciting.
Not that we've enabled that.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why we haven't in a second. But I've seen it happen. We at NAB, we were just displaying that for people so they could see just how powerful that
the headroom there
is. Yeah. It's a lot more memory and a lot more GPU speed, and it just is. I think it's 18% more. It's a 35% faster GPU, 18% faster CPU. It's 10 core versus 8 core, and it boosts the memory bandwidth from 50 gigabytes to 100 gigabytes.
Yeah.
So, this is a big deal for an app like ours. Now, if you were using the iPad for mostly word processing and watching a single stream of media, maybe you wouldn't even notice. But when you're doing multiple layers and, video is hard because we have to prepare the media coming up down the timeline. So it's not like a stream where you can look ahead for the next hour and say, okay, I got it. We know where we're going. But with editing, we're always looking ahead, preparing, loading, because the next cut could be a frame away or a minute away or a second away. So that kind of difference in speed matters a lot to us.
So the M2 added support for ProRes as a format on iPad. Is that something that LumaFusion plays well with on the M2 iPad Pro, or?
Yeah, even on the M1, you can do and it's not ProRes RAW. That's the only thing that it isn't. But yeah, we have HDR support and ProRes support and all that good stuff. And I think our export rate of 4K, I think, is 150 megabits per second. So we're not talking low quality stuff. And I'm always kind of amused because people are exporting these huge files to YouTube, which is just going to squish them anyway. But yeah, but still, you can if you want.
You can, and then it'll,
if you want that big file.
Yep. So I'm curious kind of what the role the iPad plays in your own life these days. Is it, you're testing LumaFusion, or is it serve any purpose in your life as kind of a work computer to handle email or different things for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in my personal life, I use it for everything from shopping when I shop, because I want to maybe... I'm kind of lazy, to be honest, and I do my grocery shopping in my kitchen.
Yep.
I can open the fridge. Oh, okay, Instacart, and just so I do that from my iPad. I do my kids' homework from the iPad, because there's things like Zern, which is a math program where you can just log in and do it there, and it's all touch, so it's fun. I definitely take it with me whenever I travel, and I always download as many movies and shows as I can possibly fit on my device.
Then I get back at the end of the trip. It's like, I only watched like 10% of that stuff, but I'm glad I had it.
Yeah. And I always have my Apple headphones, actually we have it, my son and I both have Apple headphones, so we can sit on the plane and both connect to the same movie and watch a movie together. Nice, But for work, I love Procreate, just for making fun graphics, and you can even animate, you can animate something and then key it in LumaFusion. Dropbox is, you got to have that. Keynote. And whenever I'm doing a presentation, I love to present from my iPad rather than laptop. And I like Mindly. I don't know if you know that app.
I've actually not heard that one.
It's just like a mind. Yeah, it's just a mind map. And, if I'm trying to organize my thoughts, and like I was doing some website design, and I thought about making a boring sort of web, or, a website map of all the pages. Instead, I put it in Mindly so I could see each page as a dot and then spread it out from there. And then anything that synchronizes over the cloud, I just, you just use, you don't even think about it, but notes, I put a note on my computer, and at home I can get, it's just, what I like about the iPad is it takes things that are mundane and makes them almost magic. Like, you just feel there's something, it's almost intangible that, and I've been thinking about it because of your interview today. I was thinking, well, what is it that makes it really fun? And I think it's probably that it's so responsive to your touch. Because there's other things like Microsoft Surface or whatever, it just isn't the same. You don't have that magic, feeling like you're really interacting with your stuff. And so for editing, I mean, there's nothing better, because you really are picking up your media and moving it around. And like if you want to shrink a clip and you just use your two fingers to squeeze it down, you kind of feel like you're, a magician doing these things, So, I love it.
When I first played with the iPad in the Apple Store back, 2010 or whatever, the Maps app was like, ooh, I'm like interacting with a real map here. It's
That's right. I like that power play.
What's your current iPad you're using these days? Do you like the smaller 11-inch or 12.9 or?
Well, I have to admit that I have 3 that I'm currently using daily. And I don't know why that happened, but I wanted the M2 version to go to NAB with, because I knew I wanted to show all the tracks. But and also my eyes aren't as good as they used to be. So a bigger screen for me is better.
Have you been taking advantage of the new feature in iOS 16 that lets you like make stuff a little bit bigger, even
magnifying? I've tried that. For me, I'm not sure. My eyes might enjoy it. I'm not sure if my brain can keep up with it. So what were the other 2 iPads? You had the M2, and that's the I have an iPad Pro M2 and iPad Pro M1, and then I have an 11-inch.
Okay.
And we do, if we were doing a mock-up for development or something, it's kind of cheating to use the 12 because everything fits, right?
Right, yeah.
So I have to use the 11 for that. And then I also, they get mad at me if I don't use the iPhone. I make an iPhone version as well, like the very smallest one we support. So that's challenging.
I can imagine.
You've made this beautiful feature, and then now fit it into 2 inches. Yes, it's fun.
Yeah. And I don't think we've actually said what is your role within LumaFusion, Luma Touch?
We didn't cover that. I'm the co-founder, and also I am the lead designer. So I design the features. I would say I'm the person who says no the most, unfortunately. I'm like the person that, Chris and I share that duty, but he's quality from another standpoint. He wants the thing to be performant and, bug-free. I want it to feel good. I don't really... I love that you can achieve things. That's kind of ground zero. But if I ever open the app and say, oh, that frustrated me, I'm like, we got to fix that. Because I don't want to build you know how you're using software and it's just... You need a manual to that's frustrating.
Yeah.
I don't ever want that. So that's why it takes us so long, I'm thinking, because of me. But yeah, so I'm the but I do have a team here of usability people. That also do testing, and they do support. But when we go through a round of usability testing, we all kind of jump for joy because we get to leave what we're doing behind and go into our usability room and meet all these wonderful people that come in to
and everyone
test.
Has a different perspective, I'm sure, that makes you think of things you didn't see. Yeah.
Oh, it's the best. We get more information from 1 week of usability testing than we would ever get from me.
Yeah. Would have been some of the biggest eye-openers, oh, I can't believe we didn't notice that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's usually something because we're so in the weeds, building something that, the hardest thing to solve, not the hardest for sure, but one thing that the usability testers found, which was kind of funny, is they could not find where to start the feature. Right. And I had to write a bug that said, we need a little pop-up that says this is where multicam is. Yeah. Because I couldn't think of a better way,
Right, because you only have so much room in the interface, and, makes sense,
you can't just add buttons all over on you can't add buttons all over on an iPad. We don't have any more room on the iPhone.
No.
And even if we did, there's not hovery pop-up. There's not tool tips that just automatically show up when your hand hovers over a button. You have to go to a certain place to display them, which nobody does. So each icon needs to be designed in a way that speaks to people. And so sometimes, we could create a button, but I don't know what button would communicate this thing I'm trying to communicate.
Yeah.
There just isn't a...
No. Especially a really tiny one that would work on iPhone, Yeah.
Yeah, automatic synchronization. I mean, we did come up with a icon for that, but you have to see the words too to understand what it means.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking back to, I have an original iPhone still running iOS 1.0.1 that I boot up from time to time. And it's fun back then looking at instead of, buttons, there was text that you clicked on that very clearly said what it did. And over the years, you kind of learn what it does, and they made it less text heavy. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Over time you can do that. But frankly, we've run out of room. There's on the iPad we have room, but not on the iPhone. And I remember an older design where we had a tray that kind of opened and closed for the iPhone. And eventually we got rid of that. And then recently I told the customer, oh, we don't have room for that. And he said, oh, you could put things in a tray. I was like, yes, we did that. Nobody liked that either, because then you have to open the tray and close the tray.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you mentioned Multicam was kind of in the works for many years, and I think I saw like a test flight version 999 as like your like skunkworks thing as you're working on that alongside other features.
Yes.
What have been some of the features that you've managed to release while working on Multicam? I know version 3 hit last year with some pretty major additions as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things. Did we have the stabilizer?
No,
from Cornell?
that's that was
that was after I talked to you. Yeah, so the stabilizer has been a very popular feature. It's free in the app, and it's developed by CoreMelt, and we have developed a plugin architecture for companies like CoreMelt that are willing to work with us to create plugins that can be integrated into our app, because Apple doesn't have a plugin architecture for video, only for
just audio. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have done that. We did video scopes, which was a long time request. So we now have histogram, waveform, and vectors scopes, and a lot of different settings you can set on those. And honestly, I think the thing that made the biggest difference for me were all the audio tools that we added graphic UIs to.
Yeah.
And the latest one we added was we had an 11-band EQ before, which was great. It's just 11 set bands. But now we have a parametric EQ where you can set the cue width, and positioning of the cue. And you can combine all these different EQ filters together and see them on the UI. So you see what you're currently working on in purple, and kind of see other things you worked on, other filters that are in play in white. And that turned out really well and is super helpful. And then recently we just added a machine learning voice isolation feature. And it was one of Apple's filters.
Yeah, I noticed this was
to implement.
Spherite. That was an addition alongside with Apple release that. And it's super cool tech, because it's basically, I think, uses what they use for FaceTime, which they do live, but in the post-processing world, I think it works a lot better.
It's amazing. You can go record audio in, say, an echoey bathroom, and then with a single click have it turn out like you recorded it properly.
Yeah.
So I really like that.
Does that affect within LumaFusion? Is the processing for that happen as you do the video export, or is that done sometime else during
You can hear it instantly. So you just tap the button, you hear it. I'm not sure behind the scenes when they actually bake it in, but you can turn it right off and on and hear it immediately.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a wet dry slider, so you can kind of say how much of that you want. But
okay.
I've never turned it more dry, because it always sounds great. So
yeah. And your guys' support for external hard drives has come a long way with SSDs and stuff, especially being able to edit off those without copying stuff over, which is super nice.
Another thing we were showing at NAB, which was really cool. We did a talk, and we were showing Multicam. And it was to a group of people that would not have shot on iPhone. So I wanted to show them how powerful the external drive situation can be with an iPad. So we got a OWC Go dock. What's a dock Go? I didn't know it's a Go dock.
Yeah.
And it had lots of ports in it for external drives. So, and I told Chris, what we're going to do is we're going to plug in 3 USB-C drives, and then we're going to multicam at it from it. And he said, he laughed at me. He said, "No, we're not." And I said, "Oh yeah, we are."
We're gonna do it live as a demo.
He kind of was like, "Okay, fine," but it was, it was a live talk.
Right.
And when we got to NAB, he said, let me try that. I don't think it's going to work. And then he was like, "That is amazing. Like, it just worked flawlessly."
Yeah.
So we took it. So during our talk, we did we had a couple drives already connected. We did a recording of me talking.
Mm-hmm.
We took it out of the camera, stuck it into the Go Dock, and then dragged the clip to the timeline with no transfer at all. And it was, I mean, I liked our talk. It wasn't heavily visited because I think the name of our talk was a little bit confusing, due to, remote. I think it was mobile remote production, and I think in broadcast world that means those big trucks, right?
Yeah.
So it didn't work out well, but our talk was great. It's just nobody was there to see it. So.
And with editing off of externals, can you explain the process a bit? Because I know when you can add stuff and then you kind of select it to add it. Is there a toggle to like make it not add to the library, or how does that actually function?
Actually, in the settings panel, you can just turn on external drive editing, and if it's on, then when you drag a clip to the timeline, it is just looking at that drive.
Gotcha.
The good part of that is it's not transferring anything. The bad part of that is if you disconnect that drive, you no longer have the media on your timeline. So there is a check mark in the settings where you can say, just turn it off. And that way, when you drag the clip from your external drive to the timeline, then it just background copies that media. So, that has the benefit of you lose that drive or it disconnects and you're still fine on what you've already edited.
Yeah. Have LumaFusion works with Proxy video files, I'd imagine, or does it not?
Well, the one place everything that we put on the timeline, except for one situation I'm going to talk about, is its native file format. But Frame.io can deliver. Well, it automatically delivers proxies. So if you put into Frame.io some very high res thing or something that isn't supported by iOS, it will automatically deliver perfect files for iOS.
Okay.
So we don't have to do anything. It's just there. And then when we export, we have a setting, whether to get the original media or not.
Yeah. So I was just thinking it'd be interesting if you're working off of servers that have all the media files to like somehow encode a proxy that's kind of light and fast, and then when you do your final render, grab that stuff from the servers. And I don't know.
Yeah, I think one question is if we decided to add 16 tracks to the M2 device because it can. Right. Then if you edit a 16-track timeline and then decide to try to open that on your iPhone or something else, then what's the user experience? I mean, certainly we could say, no, you can't do that. Yeah. But from my perspective, I want it to be a gentler experience where we give some options for recovery. So, I don't know if that would involve proxies or it would involve... I just don't know. So that's what that's why we haven't done this.
That's why it takes a bit to figure out the good solution that works for it.
Yeah. I mean, so for instance, like Resolve has all the tracks. I don't know how many on their iPad, but they're only available on the higher end devices. Yeah. You can't get Resolve for iPad on an iPhone, for instance.
No, definitely not.
So, so by limiting what you can do, they've made it easier for themselves, which is not a bad idea. But we're in a situation where we want to keep everybody able to do editing on any device. Yeah, no, and it's very much appreciated. And I love how the app, because you may work for iPhone, and the window gracefully scales up and down. Even you guys got kind of for free with Stage Manager on external displays.
a big version of LumaFusion that can, you can work on a 42-inch TV or a 30-inch or 27-inch monitor. And it's really nice there.
It is. So, yeah. So even before Stage Manager, we did have this external, monitor situation where you just, if a monitor is plugged in, there's a little button that pops up under the preview and you can tap there. If you don't tap there, you would get a mirroring of your device. And if you do, then you just get the preview out. And that is quite nice for, like, I like to see things on a bigger screen.
Yeah.
Even though the iPad is a really great screen, it's still small for me.
It is, yeah. With Stage Manager, it's pretty limited as far as, like, you couldn't have a way to swap that and have preview on your iPad screen and have external be all your timeline stuff over trackpad and keyboard, or is that possible somehow?
It would be possible. We haven't implemented that, but that would be a possibility if people thought, if people started contacting us and saying, well, I would love this app if it did that. But so far, nobody has actually mentioned it so much.
Yeah. But yeah, it is quite nice working on the big screen when I'm, not on the go, and it is a good experience there.
Yeah.
And then something I did notice too is, as I was like researching, the app download size is 199.6 megabytes. Is that a pretty important thing to stay under 200 so people can download this on the go?
I mean, we're going to try to stay under there as long as we can. And there's a couple reasons why we can do that. One is that we're constantly re-optimizing the code.
Yeah.
So that's just something that is part of the housekeeping of LumaFusion, is to not let the code get old and klutzy.
Right.
So the other thing is we don't use SDKs like Facebook and that we used to have it, but then they changed it, and now it's a huge SDK and it will bloat your app. So you can export through the Apple export manager where you say other app, and then it can go there.
Yeah.
So we don't do that. And there's one other reason. Oh yeah, we don't have a large amount of content in the app.
Yeah.
So the minute we start adding, say we want to do 3D models and we had to store those locally, some sort of model, then we'd start bloating the app up.
Yeah.
But right now, everything is programmatic, and everything that's not programmatic is like story blocks. It lives in the cloud, and then when you need it, we bring it down.
Yeah.
So your app can get large if you're editing a lot of stuff and you don't manage your media.
Yeah.
But we do have a lot of tools in the cleanup section of the settings that allow you to delete unused cached media, or even used cached media if you so choose, and then some automatic. And whenever you delete a project, for instance, you can set it to delete the caches.
Yeah.
Not your original media, but the cached media, right? So yeah,
because even 2 terabytes can fill up with video if you're not careful.
I know, it's so sad.
So something I'm curious about is the touch experience is amazing, and the trackpad stuff is really good too. And you have a ton of keyboard shortcuts, which is awesome. I'm curious if you experimented with modifier keys to kind of morph the trackpad to do some kind of behavior. For example, within Ferrite, I can hold down the Option key in the trackpad instead of selection, instead of like a standard cursor, turns into like a big, pointing line where I can select or delete stuff without any other kind of things going on.
I think we do a little tiny bit of that on Mac silicone devices.
Yeah.
But I think it would definitely be something that I'd like to explore more. And the one thing that comes to mind that we could do is maybe have a modifier for trimming, so that, like, if you're zoomed out and your trimming is very granular, not very granular,
right?
You're trimming too fast, right? And then you hold down the modifier key, maybe getting into 1 frame at a time trimming or something like that. Like, I would want it to be somehow related to making editing faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the key with all that stuff, right? So let's take into version 4. This is a big update, as we've been talking about. So multicam, as we've said, multiple camera angles. Can you kind of explain the basis of multicam before we dive into the nitty gritty?
Yeah, sure. So first, there's several reasons you might use multicam. One is obvious if you've shot with more than one camera at a time. Mm-hmm. And then you don't want to have to edit by looking for the synchronized point.
Yeah.
You can have LumaFusion synchronize your media, and then you just tap to cut to what you want to cut to. That's the obvious one. But another one would be if you have a separate mic. Like reporters do this a lot. They'll have a separate mic they're holding out, and then they have their camera. And that media has to be sunk up somehow before they edit. So you can use multicam like that. You're just syncing one audio and one video, and you make a clip, and that's it. You just edit with that clip. Right?
Yeah.
Another way, another reason you might use it. So we have two sort of workflows that are represented in the UI. One is specifically for things like music videos, because we have this thing we call the primary track. Yeah. And the primary track is your final mixed track that your musicians probably performed to. And you're going to use that track to sync to, but you never want to cut it when we're switching.
Yeah.
So we have a primary track for that. And then we have, so that's for music videos, but if you're doing more of like an interview where you have 2 or 3 cameras, and maybe one of your cameras has good audio, but you also have a Zoom mic, and you have an off camera, you have all these different audio situations. So we've got mapping. So you can say, every time I cut to camera 2, I want to hear audio from the Zoom. And every time I cut to camera 1, I want to hear its own audio. You can really set that up.
That's cool.
So that's one. But this morning, I was surprised by a customer who was a one-man band, and he was doing a acoustic guitar solo, and he used that, primary track to record himself doing the whole song from different angles. He only had one camera, though, but he just did it multiple times to the same audio. Yeah. And then he used that audio because he recorded that as he, on each clip.
Yeah, I hear in the professional film world, movie world, because the cameras can be so large, they'll run the same scene multiple times, and I'm guessing they're using time codes to synchronize for those edits.
Sure. Yeah, you could do that too if you had time code. Well, in that case, that's a little bit different. I mean,
timing is hard to get exact every time.
Multiple cameras, multiple cameras with time code would definitely work, and we do support that. You can synchronize either by audio waveforms or by simply time code on your clips. And then, coming up sometime soon, we'll have linear or LTC time code. So if you had a time code generator like a tentacle sync, we'll be able to sync using that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Cool. And then as far as the maximum angles, we mentioned 6. Is it 6 plus 1 audio?
Yeah. Each of the 6 angles can have audio, and then an additional primary audio track that doesn't get cut.
Okay. Excellent. And then as you've mentioned before, sync is very important. And I learned the hard way, thinking I was doing a music performance, audition type thing, multicam. And I don't know, 10, 20 takes, trying to get this perfect. I thought I had the right one for the audio sync, and because they're very similar. And then I discovered, because LumaFusion did match up the parts that it could match up. It's oh, this is right. And then I start that edit. It's no, it wasn't right. So it's very important to label your media, everything properly. Yeah. Well, what are some of the tips you might have for organizing all your media, making sure you're working with the right take and whatnot? Yeah,
I mean, I'll say 2 things. One is not exactly your question, but I'll get to your question. First one is, if you are doing a music video, record your final song first, and then play back that every take. Play back the same clip every take, because then all the takes are going to sync, and it's just your performance, right?
Yeah.
But for organizing, it depends on where your clips are. Like if you're going to import them from Dropbox or from someplace else, or a drive, I would say it's really important to create folders and name your clips. But if you have put them in the Photos app, for instance, you can't name them. But you can make albums. Like a lot of customers make albums, but that's all before you get into LumaFusion. But once you get into LumaFusion, one thing I do is color tag all my clips.
Yeah.
And I'm a little bit floaty with it. Like one time I might okay, in this case, I want all my interview clips to be blue and then all of my B-roll to be green. So I can just quickly look at my library and see, what's what. Or I might say good, better, best. Well, or bad, better, best. Well, actually, you just delete the bad ones. So it's always good, better, best. But just, color code your media. And then you can search in LumaFusion for that color. You can actually search for blue, and it'll find all your blue tagged shots.
Oh, very nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's also a search. There's a sort in the little menu where you can sort by size, by date, by name, resolution, all sorts of things in there.
Nice. So the actual editing process, you have your 6 angles, and then you guys added a while back the ability to resize kind of the different quadrants within LumaFusion. Kind of, I guess, as far as sizing, how big can you make that on like a 12.9-inch iPad? Can it take up the majority of your screen as you're editing, or what's that look like?
Yeah, I mean, you can. So there's 2 things. One is there's a little handle that you can, adjust the size of the timeline versus the library or preview. And then there's also a layout button that you can say, I just don't want to see anything but my timeline and my preview. Maybe you're done drawing clips over and you just want to focus on your timeline. And then from there, you can expand your timeline as big or little as you want. So it is pretty flexible. And also on the iPhone, I think people use that layout button a lot because they're swapping in and out what they want to use.
Yeah, to maximize their space.
Yeah. But no, I think it's been, through the pandemic was a difficult time because we grew, our team doubled in size.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But sometimes, we had hired people we've never met, and it's just challenging to work like that, because we were pretty tight knit here, at least in Seattle.
Right.
The design and support and all is in Seattle, and developers are in Salt Lake, and each of our teams was pretty tight knit. Like we like coming in and hanging out together.
Right. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we can't hang out, and we tried all sorts of things, coffee meetings, and all, virtual coffee meetings or games, but there's just nothing like
the
getting together
in person. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, as we said before, the process of editing in Multicam is one of my favorite things in the world. You're just watching back your performance and just tapping between all the angles. After you do that first pass, what's the process like for doing the fine tuning? So you want to change the cut a couple frames or whatnot. Yeah,
it's very powerful in that when you're switching, you can always go back and switch to a different angle for one switch. You can also adjust the switch point with just this little roll trimming. But I think one of the most cool things is you can actually go all the way back to the synchronizer and say, I want to color correct this whole angle. I don't want to go into every clip and color. I want to color correct the whole angle. And then you're back in your timeline, everything's switched, and you can additionally say, for this one switch, I want to color correct this one switch. So there's a lot, and you can do that at any time. You could actually go remap your audio after you've switched. Like, you can just go back to the synchronizer and say, I made a mistake. I want to do this differently. And it's just going to update everything automatically. So
that's very cool.
Yeah, it's pretty flexible.
Yeah. And then, so the multicam clip edits, it's treated as like a compound clip when you're done and you go back to your regular timeline. Is that kind of how it functions?
Yeah. At first we had made it so it was, well, what I called loosey-goosey.
Yeah.
Like, you've cut all this stuff and put all this work into it, and then you can pick up a clip and everything's out of sync. I just like, no, I don't want that.
Yeah.
So we made this container where you tap once and you can pick up the container and move it around like a clip.
Mm-hmm.
But if you tap a second time, you can get into the single clips inside the, that was hard to say. You can get into the single clips inside the container so that you can, modify those. You can color correct them. If you do something to change the continuity of time,
mm-hmm.
like you make something longer.
Yeah, like you can do slow motion within a multicam edit.
Well, if you did that, it would say, hey, you're no longer inside this sacred container of time.
Yeah.
And it will break it apart and just say, okay, now you have two. Okay. Because this continuity of time has been messed with.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. At first, it might feel like, oh, I wish it would stay together. But when you think about it, you could never go back and re-switch that.
No. Yeah.
Because, it's just broken. It's broken from the multicam sense.
Right.
It's not broken from the editing sense. You might always want to do that, but you want to do your switching and synchronizing, and then now you've got your piece. It's like a clip. Mm-hmm. Now you can do what you want with it and break it up and stuff.
Okay. Yeah. And then, am I remembering correct? You can actually copy like the multicam clip into like even a different project if you wanted to.
You can, yes, you can copy it. I think at the moment it'll create a second copy of that.
Okay.
So that you can still mess around with the first one and not ruin the second one.
Yeah, just mirror it over. Yeah. Any other little tidbits out to multicam? Any other like little touches that you really love that your team was able to do that we haven't touched on?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on the functionality of multicam, but I want to say that it is fun. Like you will have fun with it. Even if you put things in there that are not synchronous. Mm-hmm. Like the other day, I just put a bunch of backgrounds from story blocks in there.
Yeah.
And then just like I cut it to music. I just cut it to the beat to music. And it was, it created a nice background that was, I did it in seconds and it was fun and beautiful. And so I think people are going to find fun ways of using multicam that don't even involve multiple cameras.
Yeah. And that's the fun thing.
The
live editing nature is just so addictive. Like it's instant kind of gratification of you watching something and seeing a result.
And actually, I think in the future, we'll be able to bring in ISO files from live editing, actual live switchers.
That'd be amazing. Because the products in iOS for that now, I think there's one, and it's like $200 a month or something stupid. It's like it's out of the realm of.
Is that Switcher Studio?
Yeah,
or
Switcher
something?
Studio.
Yeah.
I think it's like $50 a month. It seems like a great piece of software, but it's just unless you're getting paid for it, it's hard to justify. Yeah,
I think it is a great piece of software, most likely. And wow, they are doing some amazing things.
They are,
with after you've switched and done your live thing, what next,
Mm-hmm.
But I think the thing is, there's a difference to me in live switching and editing. So the way I would put it is that when you're live switching, you're at the place and you have these perceptions and you're able to, feel the performance while you're there. Yeah. But as an editor, your job is to recreate that all those perceptions that are happening. And so it would be nice to be able to have that ISO file that's already switched, imported into LumaFusion with the media, and then just make the adjustments that are the mistakes that were made in real time.
Yeah.
So you get both that sensation of the live and you get the fine tuning of post switching.
Yeah.
So.
And in what ways is the Multicam more fun to you than, say, what Final Cut's done with their implementation? Like, what are some of the just like the fun nature of it?
Well, I mean, something I can't take credit for really is just the touch nature. Is just, there's nothing more fun than pointing at something and seeing it happen.
Yeah.
But we really made it so when we did our usability tests, we made the test so that if a person, like an average person, couldn't get through the whole multicam edit without trying to look in a user guide or trying to ask questions, then we failed. So this is something where it's not like a wizard. It doesn't guide you, but the next step is obvious. So it's low stress and at the same time quite powerful. So the fact that we have the audio mapping able to be done in the synchronization, that's different.
Yeah.
So it's like kind of like you do a little bit of work up front, and then from then on you're free to just explore and have everything come out right. Also, our timeline with the container doesn't let you get in trouble as easy. It doesn't let you go out of sync or pull a clip out and then wonder what happened to and then our primary audio track is unique as well. So there's just a lot of things we rethought and did different. And I think the experience is just more fun.
Yeah. And as far as all the transitions within LumaFusion, are you able to use any and all of those within a Multicam? And the timing doesn't get thrown off with it'll just
right. It'll keep, there's obviously media there because you're switching between clips. So we just keep the same timing and you can drop any transition onto those internal cuts that have been switched.
And if you have one that's like fading out and fading in, it'll do the fade. It'll go to the next cut and look at that and incorporate that.
Yeah. Any of those, and we've added quite a few new transitions, and we'll be adding more. But there's a lot. You just drag them to the cut and should be good to go. You can also add them to the end or beginning of a container, a multicam container. Or between two and stuff like that.
And then earlier you mentioned about the M2 having so much headroom with maybe 16 tracks. The reason for not implementing that is so device-wise it works on more devices. Is that kind of the
and I'm not saying we're not going to implement it. I'm just saying that we want to implement it in a thoughtful way so that we don't lead our customers down a path that gets them stuck.
It's a tricky balance. I don't know, doing a pro mode with LumaFusion only in this device would, I don't know. It's tricky to make that intuitive to.
But I think there's probably options, whether those options are, automatically flattening tracks or
the proxy.
I don't know. Well, that'll be the things we have to discover. What is the most useful way of moving to a lower end device?
So this was a huge feature many years in the works. Are there other big things like this that spatial audio within LumaFusion, stuff like that? It's just long-term kind of things that you guys have your investigative process still.
We do. And I'll tell you what, Tim.
You do. That's good to hear. Too early to talk about that.
I have learned my lesson. No, we have, we had announced some things prior to Multicam, and actually we put them on the back burner until we could get so we can focus on multicam.
Yeah.
So I can mention those things, but they are certainly not the only things that
Mhm.
we're working on. But those things are advanced keyframing. So
Mhm.
keyframe easing and curves. That
Yeah.
means you can make a ball go in a circle rather than a square,
Mhm.
or you can have it start slow and speed up, or so on.
Yeah.
So that I don't know if I can mention the one that. Well, yeah. Okay, we're working on speed ramping. So
very cool.
everybody beats us
that's a
up
fun
for
one.
speed
I
ramp.
mean,
If nobody uses that thing, I'm
Yeah.
going to be mad. I'll be able to look and see how many people are using
Yeah.
this feature.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that is in the hopper. And also, we had gotten quite a long ways on subtitling before. Yeah. We were, I don't know what percent, maybe 60% done with that
Mhm.
feature when we said, okay, we just have to focus on one thing.
Yeah.
And that was multicam. So now we can kind of open those doors again. And at this point, I think it's wise to re-examine whether those are the top priorities.
Yeah.
Considering, the world changes and things, people want different things. So.
Does Apple's advances with machine learning help with subtitling at all? I know, like, accessibility features, they have like live text and video, but I'm guessing you guys can't tap into that directly, or?
Yeah, I mean, well, speech to text for
Mhm.
sure. They have a version. It's, there are specialists like Speechmatics that do a more robust version of that.
Mhm.
So whether or not we would use Apple, I mean, obviously the easiest thing to do would be implement Apple's, but we might look at other options as well for speech to text
Yeah.
for subtitling. And then, all of those other options come with benefits that we might be able to take advantage of, like translation and
Yeah.
just the accuracy involved
Right.
with some of them is better than others. So
Yeah.
for sure,
Yeah.
we'll be looking at all that. And I think, now that we've done the stabilization plugin, we're looking at other plugins.
Very cool. Yeah.
Well, integrating other pieces of software as if they were plugins.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And I have not seen 3D audio as a thing in pretty much any iOS app really to date. Is to do like a Dolby Atmos mix. Is that something that's just kind of impossible within iOS frameworks today, or is that something like?
I don't think it is impossible, actually. Okay. But don't quote me on that.
Right. It'd be very entailed yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
That's something I'd love to
we
just...
were talking to Dolby a while back, and I don't recall what the end of that conversation was, but I do think there's stuff there to be done.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be super interesting. Just from I've always just to play around with it. I don't know, it'd just be a fun thing to, visually play with sound in that way and have different audio sources.
It would be, totally.
Especially in multicam, you could even integrate like, you have like, different camera sources coming in from different places,
Now you've just blown my mind. Right? I don't know. So much pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true though. You could really map your cameras and then have the audio, working that way.
Yeah.
Well,
one of the fun multicam things I heard about was like people at a wedding have like, people in the audience recording video and using all those sources, syncing it up. And you can even do things like sync up, like, you have one main camera and then like do like different passes of these. You'll see video just cut in for like, a couple minutes within this hour, and you have this like.
Wouldn't it be cool if the positioning of their iPhones was good enough to adapt the audio?
That would be amazing. Yeah, you somehow have.
This is a little bit outside of our realm, but I think
metadata on the video files for like.
That's right. You were 10 feet to the left.
Exactly. Yeah. Well.
Someday. Although.
Right. LumaFusion in 20 years. Well,
that's right. I might not be alive to see that, but
right,
you can like go to my gravesite and scratch it on the wall or something.
Yeah.
We did it.
Yeah. So Anything we haven't covered about LumaFusion that I'd like to mention before we wrap it up?
Obviously, we are very proud that LumaFusion is a one-time purchase still. It's you don't have to pay a subscription to have it.
Yeah.
And Multicam is also a one-time purchase. So we've stuck to our model, except for, Storyblocks is a stock library that we pay a subscription for, basically. Mm-hmm. So that is a subscription. But other than that, yeah, we have stuck to our one-time purchase model, and we think it is fair to our customers and also is working for us so far. So that's a really cool thing. And also, we're just super happy. Chris and I have just been two of the luckiest people on earth to be in a position where you have a startup, a bootstrap company that just does its job and works and employs people and employs ourselves. So I couldn't be happier to be where we are, and I'm very grateful. So.
That's great, yeah. And yeah, it's a no-brainer add-on for Multicam. It just opens the potential up to what kind of projects you can tackle that much easier.
Yeah, it's fun too. So.
And for more information, is it luma-touch.com? What's the website?
You can just do lumatouch.com,
okay.
LUMA. And then for Twitter and other places, just do @LumaTouch and you'll find us.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Terri. It's been a great chat. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you. Me too. I really did enjoy it. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Well, that was an interview with Terri all about LumaFusion version 4. My thanks again to Terri for her time recording this interview, and my thanks to you for your time and attention tuning in. As a reminder, you can support this podcast over at patreon.com/iPadPros or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. I'll talk to everyone again real soon.